couldn't imagine how this conversation was going to go. Mum, your boyfriend is Father Christmas. Try not to freak out. It's a more, Nick said to Mum as she entered the barn and pulled her hat off. What's wrong with her, Mum asked. She's lame, Nick said, showing Mum over to the pen. She was fine this morning, Helen, but then she started to limp. I don't want to trouble you, not on Christmas Eve. Mum clambered into the pen, tutting, and knelt beside her more to check her over. I'm sorry, Will said loudly, holding his hands up, but aren't you going to say anything, Mum, about the sleigh, the reindeer, the man in the red suit? Oh, William, she sighed, glancing at him. I'm not daft. I already knew, of course. What? I yelped. How long have you known? Will demanded as Nick started to laugh. Since just after we met last year, she said, rummaging in her bag. And you didn't tell us? I couldn't believe this. She gave him more an injection. Think about it. Would you have believed me? You would have thought I'd lost my marbles if I told you I was going to introduce you to my new boyfriend, Santa. And besides, Father Christmas's identity is the biggest secret in the world. We decided to tell you when you'd got to know him a bit better. She stroked him more. Her legs inflamed. Looks like she might have stumbled into a rabbit hole and hurt herself. She'll be all right, but no flying tonight. That might be a problem. Nick scratched his beard. We're down to a team of 7. Sorry, but that's doctor's orders. She climbed out of the pen and folded her arms. And I'm not too happy with you either. To my surprise, Nick blushed bright red and looked extremely contrite. It's just, my job is... I know it's important, Mum said. She walked over to Nick and touched him on the arm. I struggle to balance everything too. I send the kids to breakfast club and after school clubs so I can do the job I love, a job that keeps a roof over our heads. But I keep my promises to the kids and make time for them. They're just as important. I'm just as important. I know that on this night of the year especially, your job is going to keep you busy, and that's okay. The problem is that you said you would be there, and you weren't. Nick raised his head and looked her in the eyes. I know, I wanted to be there tonight, and I thought I'd be able to fit it all in. This is new for me. We all make mistakes, Mum said with a smile. We can learn together, as a family. As a family, Nick agreed, taking both her hands in one of his. I'm sorry for not being there for you. I forgive you. They smiled at each other and went in for a kiss. Will started making throwing up noises, and I covered my face with gloved hands. There was no way I was going to look at that. Mum watched the reindeer drag the sleigh out of the barn with a concerned frown on her face. That empty harness looks wrong, she said. I know, but you said yourself, there's no way a more can fly. Nick looked extremely worried. We'll just have to see how we get on without her. Maybe if we stay below cruising height, takeoff won't be too much of a problem. We'll be at risk of being spotted by aeroplanes though. I'll have to make some adjustments for that. He trailed off, not sounding convinced by his own words. I looked up, suddenly having an idea. Hey, does it have to be reindeer pulling the sleigh? Everyone looked at me. What do you mean, Mum asked. Well, we're on a farm, I pointed out. Could you make another animal fly and use them to pull the sleigh? Technically, yes, Nick said, but horses don't like heights and cows don't fit the harness. I smiled. I wasn't thinking of a horse. 5 minutes later, Mum was walking up the path, leading behind her a very bewildered-looking llama. Is it honestly going to fly, Will asked, as Mum steered it towards the sleigh. It'll have to, I said. Nick needs to get going as soon as he can. Nick and Mum buckled the llama into one of the front 2 harnesses, the animal looking about at the reindeer, all of whom were wearing extremely unimpressed expressions. Perfect. Mum stepped back to admire their handiwork. Nick shook his head, but he was smiling. Well, it's worth a try. The sleigh was packed up, the reindeer and the llama were harnessed, and Nick was finally ready to set off into the night. The long paddock made a perfect runway for the sleigh, and the 7 coursers were snorting and tossing their heads and ready to be off. The llama was looking extremely lost. Mum was standing with her arms wrapped around herself, looking nervous. Be safe, won't you? She said to Nick. I always am, he promised. Then he looked at me and Will, who was standing to one side. Nick glanced at Mum and she smirked. Are you 2 ready? He asked. Ready? Will repeated. For takeoff. We're coming with you, I gasped. If you want to. Nick patted the long bench-like seat on the front of the sleigh. Obviously, Will launched himself onto the seat. I looked back at Mum. Aren't you coming? No thanks, she said. I'm going to stay and look after Amora, but have fun and hold on tight. My heart bursting with excitement, I clambered onto the sleigh beside Will. Nick squeezed in after me, taking up half the bench by himself. He snapped the reins and the reindeer and llama suddenly stood to attention, heads pointing forward, looking at the snow-covered field where they had to run. I braced myself, ready to hear those cries of, "Oh Sprinter, oh Starlet, oh Thunder and Lightning," but they didn't come. Instead, Nick gave a roar that seemed to be a song-like language, and the animals began to charge. Their hooves dug into the grass of the paddock and they charged forwards and then upwards, their legs ploughing up through the sky as though they were running up an invisible hill. Even the llama was flying just like the others, its land-bound life apparently forgotten. The sleigh tipped back sharply and I tried not to scream as we were all thrown backwards against the massive cargo hold behind us. "Hold on tight," Nick bellowed as the sleigh soared into the sky. The reindeer seemed to find some sort of magical strength and their legs moved faster than ever. And suddenly we were so high up that the farm below looked like a toy playset and the houses around were tiny little boxes. My fright giving way to excitement, I leaned around Will to look at the fairyland of lights below, at the swirls of snow that were covering the windows and pavements under a white blanket. The air in the sky was ice cold and made me want to cough, but it felt like breathing starlight and magic, and after a moment the cold didn't seem to matter so much. At cruising height, the reindeer levelled off and their charge through the dark slowed just enough for Will and me to look at each other and burst out laughing. "This is unreal," he said. "It's magic," I replied. And beside me, Nick gave a soft chuckle and snapped the reins once more to drive the reindeer on through the night.